Hello, collective listeners. It's the holiday season. You may be listening to this on the plane ride back from mom or dad's house, or you may have hosted this year. Who knows? But I hope everybody's enjoying the holidays. We have a really great episode today. This is Justin King. He's the athletic trainer with men's basketball at Davidson University, and we'll get into it in the episode a lot. But I initially met Justin earlier on in the summer. He's a really high level thinker. And I even joke at the end that he should write a book about this, but it's not really a joke. I really think he should. I think he should kind of talk about what his program looks like, working with his strength coach. And I think we really get into the kind of the weeds about the relationship between a strength and conditioning coach and athletic trainer. Overall, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think the strength coaches and any of the professionals listening to this will really enjoy it as well. I think he just did a fantastic job of breaking everything down for those listening. And I'm really happy to kind of share his message with everybody because, like we talked about in the episode, it ultimately comes down to being there for the athlete and helping the athlete reach their success. And this is just something that, to me, is a successful program and a successful person behind that program. One of the pieces. I'm sure he would not like me saying he's the person behind the program because we talk about shared success. So I hope you all have safe travels home if you're traveling. And as always, thank you for listening. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Justin King, the athletic trainer for Davidson men's basketball, a really storied basketball program, obviously. But Justin was the main interest for me in coming on this show because I did a webinar over the summer. We'll definitely dive into this about basketball injury prevention and basketball injury management. And it kind of just blew my mind, everything Justin had to say. So I was really excited to talk with Justin. We've been able to talk a little bit outside of that webinar as well too. He's an awesome dude, so I'm really excited for everybody here to get to listen to you. And thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Connor. Appreciate you having me, man.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into it. Can you kind of give me your background in athletic training, and then what's brought you to your current position?
Absolutely. So it's my sixth season at Davidson College with their men's basketball team. Prior to that, I was working with the McNeese State men's basketball team. That was my first job in college basketball. And before that, I was at Ohio State for a year as an intern with track and field. And I think thinking back, I was like, track and field, when it comes to biomechanics and like preparing myself to do what I do today, I wish I could make every strength coach, every athletic trainer do 1 year with track and field because it just tests your limits in so many different ways. Um, and then before that was my first job as an athletic trainer at Fort Lewis College with men's basketball, men's soccer. So I graduated from Weaver State in athletic training in 2014, and I did exercise science at BYU as an undergrad. So it's been about I'll be a 10-year. I don't know what is that the goal, what anniversary
I, I'm
symbol
not. I'm
that
not
is,
quite sure,
but
but
my
that's.
10-year
I mean, that's quite
anniversary
an
as an athletic
accomplishment.
trainer. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah, especially for athletic training and strength and conditioning. That's. I mean, you're killing it.
correct. I feel like we've already like like we're now in the top 5% of most experienced people because of turnover and everything. Like 10 years is an accomplishment for an athletic training and strength conditioning to be still kicking it.
Absolutely. I mean, you're crushing it. And you bringing up track and field cracks me up a little bit too because every athletic trainer I've spoken with always talks about how track can be the most challenging, like you mentioned, but also like just makes you a better athletic trainer overall. And then strength and conditioning wise is the same thing because I don't know if you've seen the same, but it's one of those sports where if something doesn't feel 100% perfect, the athlete's going to come in immediately, and
Correct.
they're just going to almost catastrophize a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Like I feel not sorry, but I have so much respect for strength conditioning coaches that work track and field because here's the coach that's like pushing them to their absolute limit. Like they're redlining every day in practice almost. And then they're like, okay, what are you gonna do to make them stronger? You're like, oh, you have already like run them into the ground. Their muscles are already shot, and I now need to like work them to make them stronger. And then
Yep.
on the athletic training side, it's what are we gonna do to get them better? What are we gonna do these people that have these chronic issues, these biomechanic deficiencies, and I think that kind of helps. especially early on in your career, set that baseline for okay, if I can do this, if I can work with these guys, then everything else is just easier in some ways going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, and 100%. And then you in the strength and conditioning side too, it's like half the time you don't even get to program for the throwers. Usually the throws coach 100% has some program from, that was supposedly from Yugoslavia that, they got somebody, the Al Order, the discus Olympic champion, like just some crazy type of deal.
Yeah, it all goes back to the Soviet Union somehow and training
Uh,
methods of the Soviet Union.
100%, 100%. But they've been around for a reason because
Exactly.
it's successful. Yep. Well, I mean, you've been through some, I mean, storied basketball programs as well too. I mean, Weaver State's killing it this year. We've had multiple strength coaches from Weaver State on here as well too, working with basketball. But then McNeese State and then Davidson. I mean, that's quite the track record with the basketball history.
Yeah, it's been really great. I was at BYU when Jimmer was there. I got to Weber State right after Damian Lillard left, and so like really great basketball programs, really great professionals that work with those individuals that were able to kind of help me along. Um, and then I feel like I've been able to take all those great things and kind of develop into kind of what I do at Davidson today.
That's awesome. And I do have to ask the obvious question I do think some of the listeners are thinking about as well too. I mean, how's it go to the school where and working with the school where Steph Curry is the legendary basketball player?
Absolutely, and that kind of culminated into Davidson and Steph Curry, and it's like I can't believe I've been at all these places that have had such great programs, and then like kind of these singular individuals who have kind of carried that torch for the program. And I mean, Steph has been a great ambassador for Davidson basketball, and he takes care of us. I mean, we get to wear his logo on our jerseys. We get to wear it on our gear that we wear around, and so having that relationship with him has just been really really cool.
That's awesome. I mean, and that's what is so exciting to me about mid-major basketball as well too. And just watching all these games, and as I've transitioned from football to basketball, it's now been my fifth year in basketball, I believe. Like, it's just so cool to see the difference that mid-major schools can make in basketball, right? And how they can be the teams that go make massive runs in the tournament, and it's not just every time like I remember when Georgia State upset Tennessee football when I was working there. It was like the worst thing that could possibly happen because it's like you can't lose this game. Like, there's just no opportunity. But if that were to happen in basketball, it wouldn't. It'd still be surprising, but it wouldn't be nearly as shocking. And that's what just made me fall in love with college basketball. It makes it so cool to me.
Yeah, we actually were talking about this on our road trip. Like, is it how much harder is it for these smaller programs to win a football game versus a basketball game? And kind of what kind of atmosphere does that create for a basketball team? Every basketball team goes into every game knowing that if things just go their way just a little bit, they've got a chance. And I think I just love that about college basketball.
So much fun, and so that's got me. I mean, hopefully we're both in the tournament this year. That'd be
Oh
pretty
yeah,
cool.
that'd be sweet. I'll see you there.
Yeah, I was about to say, hopefully I'm watching, but no, absolutely not. Hopefully we're there. Well, I kind of want to dive right into it because when I listened to your webinar, I think it really got me thinking about how I approach my mobility work with athletes, how I kind of understand the importance of it. To me before it was kind of just like a small thing. It was like another piece of the pie, not necessarily as important as lifting in season. And then even just this past week, we had a tournament in Fort Myers, Florida. We had back-to-back games, and we upped our mobility sessions. It went from instead of just one, it went from 2 to 3, depending on the day. And I remember it was your voice actually that was in my head, and I just because we talked a month or so back, and I was like, well, what's your advice? And you said just get them moving. And so it was after the plane ride, it was after the bus ride. We did mobility things. It's so funny because our team, I think, like they don't like to admit that they like doing mobility work. They always kind of groan and we'd say we're going to stretch, but one of them kind of went up to me. He's like, "Hey, that stretch felt kind of good." I was like, "Yeah, I know it did." So I mean, it just kind of transformed how I look at my program. Can you kind of just give us a kind of a look into what that webinar was like, and then what were some of the things that you do with your team?
Absolutely. So um, when I got to Davidson, they had kind of had a history of injury struggles and stuff like that. And working at a mid major program, you have, as you know, you have a lot of expectations. but your resources are limited. Your staff sizing is limited, and so being creative in what you're doing and when you do it becomes really essential to having success and to kind of keeping the guys healthy. And so when I first got here, we said, okay, what are little things that we can do that we're not utilizing right now? What is the time that we can do? And and we saw that okay, we're going to just put in a 15-minute mobility session before each pregame meal. And so that just started this one little thing. I was brand new. I came in the day before our first exhibition game, and so I had very limited collateral of trust when working with our coaches to make a whole lot of sweeping changes. And other athletic trainers and strength coaches that I've talked to, they're like, "Well, how can you? I see your big program that you do now. How do you implement that?" And it's really not that. It's you take one little piece and you start with that. So for us, it was these guys are so busy, especially at a high academic school like Davidson. How can we best utilize this time? How can we get their bodies into a position that they can be successful when they step on the court and when they go into the weight room? What can we do there? We also started seeing through our screening processes that a lot of the limitations that the guys were having that led to some of these injuries was movement based, movement efficiency based. So we said, okay, let's let's design some team wide programs that we can do, and that was our first thing that we implemented was getting into these mobility programs that focused on hip mobility, ankle mobility, stability. How can we incorporate balance and all those different things when it comes to their health? And that's kind of developed now into our whole injury prevention program, where Coach Brian Seitz, our strength coach here, who is awesome, is able to really focus on the performance side, and then can add in some of those prevention elements as along with what he's doing in the weight room. And then I can kind of take the other side of that and say, hey, Coach B, you focus on raising our ceiling, and let me focus on raising the floor. Like, what is the thing that's going to keep our guys from going for this individual? What is the floor that if a risk drops below that floor, how high can I raise that floor to avoid the risk of injury as much as we can? And so when we got down into all of that, we said, okay, you focus on raising the ceiling of their performance, and let me focus on the mechanics to help these guys stay as healthy as possible. And so from that mobility program, we've grown into a lot of different phases, and it's been really helpful for us and really successful.
So it's really almost like a daily process. It sounds like in conjunction with your strength coach of, finding what work these guys need and then working together to work on these limitations. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this earlier about how everyone has a different philosophy of things that they think is important, of things that are actually that as a practitioner, whether it's in strength conditioning or athletic training, what am I good at as well? Because we want to maximize our strength just like we want to maximize the athlete's strength. And so I think sometimes athletic trainers and strength coaches can almost kind of butt heads because their philosophies differ. And so, hey, I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. But what we've been able to do here is we've been able to take the needs of each individual athlete. So we screen athletes at the beginning of each season. Each athlete has their own um, plan, their own kind of red flags of biomechanical deficiencies. And then instead of butting heads on saying this is my philosophy, this is your philosophy, we can say, hey, here's what we're good at. Let's now take these deficiencies that we've flagged for each player and use our own philosophies and use our own things that we're really good at to help that athlete progress functionally and physically from a performance standpoint, from an injury prevention standpoint, from a biomechanical standpoint. Because then we're not like saying your way, my way. It's let's use our collective efforts to help this individual on these um, flagged things, and then we can kind of take the whole team and say, where do these flags cross over, and then what programming can we design from a team standpoint to help them move forward. So because Coach B can't always bring in a guy on an individual basis, especially again at a mid major. you're not just working with one team. Usually, you're working with multiple teams. Um, and same thing with myself. I have other responsibilities even outside of basketball that can take away that time. But I might have more flexibility to bring in two or three guys at a time and kind of work on movement patterns. Whereas Coach B, to ask him to be able to do that in a weightlifting session is also not fair, because then you're taking away from kind of raising that ceiling, like we said before, of that athlete. So being able to create those individualized goals then allows us to take our individual, from a practitioner standpoint, skills and strengths to be able to move forward, versus just saying, hey, here's how my philosophy fits for this team. What do we want to do? No, let's individualize it, and then we can work together on that problem with the athlete as well. We bring those things to the athlete and say, hey, here's what we need to work on. Then that helps create leverage and motivation for the athlete to work on those things as well.
I mean, so it's just working together like a team, essentially, using each other's strengths to then go for the common goal, and so it works out super well. Well, my question then is, how do you guys maintain such a good relationship so that you can work together to that level?
Yeah, I think Coach Sykes is a great person, first of all, so that makes it easy. And then I think having clear understanding of what each other's strengths are, what each other's roles on the team are, and then saying, okay, here's where the guys are at. Let's both push this forward, and let's celebrate each other and our success and and one person's success, Coach B's success is my success, and my success is his success. And anytime the guys improve, that's a success for our whole team. And so I think if you can kind of build that relationship, that it helps remove any competition or any animosity that can arise kind of between these two parallel responsibilities that intersect so often. Um,
I love that perspective on it too, right? Because I mean, I can think of an example just from one of our previous games. We had somebody go down, with an ankle sprain, right, and come back the next game, and they were talking about how powerful this athlete looked, right, and how, and like more of a weight room compliment, right.
mhm.
But if the rehab process hadn't gone so well, they wouldn't have even been available for that game. So we need each other. We feed off of each other because the availability, but then the actual expression of that comes from the athletic training side, right? And then the ability to increase the ceiling, like you're saying, is what makes it successful for both of you. So truly, it's working together. I mean, I can't. I always butcher this quote. I don't know why. I can't figure it out, but it's the sum of the parts is greater than the whole.
Absolutely.
There we go. Did I get it right that time?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
first
that
time
was
ever.
good.
All right, there we go. Awesome. I don't know why I can't get it, but but it just makes a massive difference. And I've been fortunate enough to have a really good relationship with each athletic trainer I've worked with in the past. But I agree with you. I think there is kind of a somewhat animosity in between, and I think your philosophy and your viewpoint and Coach Sykes' viewpoint on that, to say our success is each other's success, is what's going to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. And I think understanding too, like, it's unfair for me as an athletic trainer to have this expectation that I just sit on the sideline and wait for an athlete to get injured and not participate in helping that athlete grow, a healthy athlete grow. Because I mean, in the weight room, you're focused on so many aspects of improving that athlete physically, whether it's speed, power, strength, balance, stability, mobility. And so I think for us, it's worked out well that, like I said, Coach B does include those stability, mobility elements into his list, but it's really hard to create a foundational, um, a foundation for those, for maybe balance and stability and mobility, when he's really trying to, set that foundation for strength and power that you have to do in the preseason, so that you can taper down or adjust in season. And so what we've been able to do, we've been able to kind of divide those elements between the two of us, so that I can take over a little bit more of the mobility and balance, foundational things, and he can kind of take over the strength and power and performance parts. So, for example, in the summertime, again, going back to our injury prevention programming, we've been able to grow from that 15 minutes of our pregame meal mobility session, and now every summer we do one paddleboard balance training session per week. So the whole team will go out and we'll go. We have a program for about 30, 40 minutes that we'll go on the paddle boards and we'll do different balance elements. We'll do different stability elements and mobility elements all on the paddle board. And then during the week, we'll come in and we'll do a land-based training where we do kind of FRC type of mobility, stability things, working on range of motion. We'll be able to go joint by joint. And then again, bring in some of those red flags from individual athletes. We can kind of sprinkle that in there to create a program that we hope is as effective as possible in keeping our athletes healthy.
I was going to make sure that the paddleboarding piece was brought up because I think it ties in perfectly to my next question, which is, how have you guys developed this buy-in into the program? Because again, like I mentioned, my athletes a lot of times I work with, they don't really like the time that it takes to put into it, right? Because I'll tell them over and over, like mobility is not a one-time thing, and all of a sudden you feel fantastic, and then you're not going to have to do another session for another 3 months. It takes time to see these results. It takes time for you to see progress within it. So, what were kind of your key points on helping to develop that buy-in?
Yeah, that's really a great question. And I think, from a strength conditioning standpoint, I think it can be easy. It's not always easy, don't get me wrong, but like, hey, you just maxed out on this lift, you just hit a new PR. Look how much easier you're pushing a guys around on the court. And I think sometimes it can be easy to kind of make those connections, but it can be a lot more difficult, especially early on when working with an athlete that's not used to doing, you know, extra mobility or extra stability programming or, 90-90 stuff, like to kind of build those build that understanding between what they're doing on those with those concepts and how that's going to translate into either improved function on the court or decreased injury risk, right? It's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove, hey, the absence of this injury that you're not having is because of all this other stuff that you've done. And that can be really challenging. And so sometimes what I'll do is a guy will kind of tweak his ankle and I'll be like, that could have been a 2 week ankle sprain. Now it's just a 2 day ankle sprain
Yep.
because of everything that you're doing, because of the ankle mobility, because of the balance training that you've done here. Um, you're able to bounce back that much faster. Or what some of our coaches have done, which is really neat, is they'll take some video from a guy as a freshman, and then they'll take some video of him as a sophomore, and they'll like actually show, look how much better you're opening up your hips now compared to last year. Like, look at you being able to sweep that ball, come over to crossover onto that other hand, pass the defender, whereas last year you weren't able to do that. And I think the humility that it requires from the coach to not, and I think this is another thing too, like it's hard not to want to take credit for an athlete's success as a support staff member. And so Davidson's a really cool place that we kind of again cheerlead each other. Like, look, like when I take an athlete and I can say, look how much stronger Coach B has made you in the weight room, or he's able to say, hey, look how much better you're moving on the court or in the weight room because of all the mobility stuff you're doing with Justin. Like that's paying off. And I think it really takes that type of community within your coaching staff, within your support staff, in order to get athlete buy-in. Um, and that's been successful for us to kind of be able to point out those things. And then after a while, after 4 or 5 years, we have seniors now that have gone through this process. Um, I mean, we since we started this program, we haven't had a freshman miss a game due to a lower extremity injury in 4 years. And so now our seniors that came in as freshmen have seen the benefits of that, and they can express that gratitude and build that culture to younger underclassmen who kind of after a couple months are like, man, this is annoying that we have to do all this, but now it's starting to click. Now that we're 3 or 4 games into the season, and they're like, oh, my body feels so much better when I've done these things and I've kind of bought in and taken it seriously. Um, and so that's been great for us kind of to build that culture from where it was 4 years ago, where kind of everyone's kind of a little bit more like annoyed, but I guess I'll do it. Justin's nice. We're gonna just kind of go through the motions. But now guys are like telling me on the weekends that they're gonna go do hot yoga on their own. So I'm like, all right, this is the dream.
That's amazing. I mean, it's just the perfect example of Rome wasn't built in a day. This development of this culture over time, and then 100% like the best buy-in you can possibly get is from the older guys on the team because they will always trickle it down to the younger athletes. And it's so funny because even my fiance went on the road trip with us this past week, and one of our players is definitely like he's a captain, he's a leader of the team and everything. And the players were waiting by a bathroom, and I was like, "What are these guys waiting for?" Like I was like, because I was waiting last time for my fiance after we got off the plane to go pick up the bags, and all the players were like, "Come on, CA, like let's go. Like, what are you waiting for?" So I was like, I got the memo, like, hey, we move, like we get to the pick up the bags. And so, same
Hmm.
example, just on the way back, I'm like, what are these guys waiting for? And all of a sudden, that same leader steps out of the bathroom. I'm like, they're waiting on him. Like, they're just waiting for him to go. Right. But if he's bought into the process, then he's going to trickle it down and they'll listen to him as well, too. And so that's going to be the best buy in 100%. But one thing that pops in my mind, too, is the recruiting aspect of that. When you talk about your relationship with the athletic trainers, with the assistant coaches, with the head coach, right? Because players know, like especially when they're getting recruited, they can tell who works well together, or if it's completely in their own silos, in their own areas, and you don't really kind of cross paths a lot. And so, from a recruiting aspect, it's really beneficial too because these players get to see this is one congruent team. They all work together. They all like each other. You can tell this stuff. And I mean, even at the age that these are, the recruits are coming in, and so it's not only a benefit from actual game availability, performance, from daily job, like just enjoying it, but then
Hmm.
also to recruiting. I mean, overall, it's an extremely beneficial thing for the program. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And any recruit that we brought in, Coach B and I have been able to sit down together with that athlete, and we've been able to present like this unified thing that we do, right? Because it isn't just, hey, I'm here to get you stronger. Hey, I'm here to keep you healthy. It's not like that, and I think we both understand like I can do all the stability and mobility training in the world, but if Coach B isn't doing the right stuff in the weight room, all of my effort is almost worthless, right?
Yeah.
And so understanding that no matter where you are, whether it's coach, support staff, like you can be doing the best job in the world, but if you have other people that aren't also doing a good job, you're going to struggle, and it can be really difficult, and it can kind of create those fissures in your support staff and your team, that can be tough. That can make it tougher for everybody. So, like you said, I think it's easy for parents and for coaches or recruits to see that as they come in and visit campuses, and so yeah, it's really great for Coach D and I to be able to sit down with an athlete or a recruit and say, hey, you know, one of the biggest things that's going to lead to your success, whether it's in college or after college, as a hopefully future pro career, is how healthy you are. And so that message has kind of really started to build around that type of thing. Like, hey, here's how we assess you when you first get here. Before you even step foot into the weight room, we're going to be able to do biomechanics testing. We're going to be able to do strength testing. We're going to be able to do all these baseline testing, and then each year we're going to be able to reassess. And kind of going back to your earlier question of like, how do you get athletes bought in? Like that reassessment that comes at the end of each year, or some people that are doing it weekly or monthly or however you're doing it, that those numbers become really valuable from creating athlete buy-in or creating athlete excitement for what you're doing. And I think all numbers don't always say are not binary. It's not one or zeros. It's not yeses or nos. It's what is the messaging that I'm going to build from these numbers? What's the story that I'm going to tell to the athletes, to the coaches? What's the narrative that our strength coach and our athletic trainer are going to build together? Because the better we can write that story, um, the better we're going to be able to create a reality and culture for the athletes to be able to work better in the weight room, to be able to work better in our mobility sessions, to be have more buy-in simply in like the pre-practice warm-up, right?
No, 100%. And I mean, I could. it's just very evident to me how successful that relationship can be, and how it can really raise the level of the program as a whole. Now, my question is too: what are the testing metrics that you're looking at for this program?
So we work with Dr. Tim Sell, who's also the sports scientist for the Carolina Panthers and FC Charlotte here in Charlotte. So our relationship with him has when we feel very grateful that he even takes the time to work with us. Um, and so we will do a lot of different measures. We'll do mobility measures. So we'll find out, ankle range of motion, hip range of motion. We will do, I'll use a lot of the bald equipment out of Australia, and we'll use the groin bar. We'll do, add abduction. We'll do counter movement jump, and we'll do uh, hamstring testing, quad strength testing, kind of get all those numbers down. And so that they're making, like I said, creating a story for the athlete, understanding that, where are they here and where do they want to be. Um, and usually when we're creating that athlete profile, we will have all these different numbers, and then we'll say, well, what are your goals? Like, what do you even want as an athlete? What do you want to be better at? Both from a performance standpoint, from a weight room standpoint, from a what's your injury health standpoint, and then that discussion again helps build that narrative, build that story for who they want to be. Because they don't, if they can't make that connection based on what they're seeing on paper and what their goals are, then their buy-in to whether it's coming into the weight room and working hard there, or coming in to see me and athletic training room to work on some of those deficiencies, this would be so much less effective.
And I love what you're saying too about the numbers painting the picture, right? What do you actually want to get out of this? Because I think it is so easy for us to just see numbers and then not necessarily relate it to ways that can motivate the athletes. Or, I mean, I've been here before, and I think every strength coach in the world has been here before too. You get testing results that aren't necessarily exactly what you were looking to see. So you kind of modify how you present it just a little bit, and then it comes out in a more positive light. But that's exactly like you're saying. You're framing it, you're painting a picture for it. But then from a motivation aspect for the athletes, it's really easy to help them with the numbers and show them here's why I like seeing people above this specific level, because we talk about with KPIs all the time, right? Our key performance indicators. Every athlete I know whose a standing vertical was over 32 inches, scored X amount of points, right? And are they necessarily directly correlated? No, but do you know that that's something that could really benefit the athlete if they were to get to that level? Yes. So, not being deceitful, but painting this picture like you're saying, and helping them be motivated is going to be extremely beneficial, especially with these testing numbers. Because I know sometimes I'll talk to guys and be like, hey, man, you got X amount of newtons on your your Nord board. They're like, I don't care, but if you're able to present it in a way that says, hey, you progressed 10% on this, you're 10% stronger here, and I've seen this work in this way in the past, it's usually going to be a lot more successful from that buy-in standpoint.
And I think too, and I love your examples that you gave, um, because for me it demonstrates like the way I look at those numbers and the way Coach Sykes looks at those numbers are very different perspectives. And so for us to each be able to sit down with an athlete and have those conversations really kind of builds that holistic approach to treating them. And I think it's kind of unfair. Again, I think athletic trainers can do a much better job of working with strength coaches in order to create this holistic approach. Because it's not fair to ask you to look at those numbers and say, not only what do you think from a performance standpoint of where they need to be, but what are the limitations? What are those things that we need to kind of control for now? But being able to both have those eyes on that and say, let's both do what we do best here can just elevate in so many different ways.
I just love it. I mean, just the aspect of working together as a team. I mean, this is the ideal relationship, right?
Mhm.
And I think you said athletic trainers can do a better job. I think strength coaches can do a better job too of actually working on that communication side too. And I think it is really easy, especially in the world of Vernon Griffith, right? I mean, everybody on Instagram sees him, and I'll take almost everything that he does and implement it as our mobility aspect, right? But that's somebody who's a personal trainer. and who has kind of delved into the world of injury prevention a little bit more than most, or the
Hmm.
mobility side a little bit more than most. And that's the gray area between strength and conditioning and athletic training. So why should I, as a strength coach, say, you know what, I can kind of take over this gray area and then leave the post injury care to the athletic trainer, and instead work together, like you're saying, to kind of be more beneficial for the athlete as a whole.
Absolutely. And I think it frees up again, everyone has their different responsibilities and different priorities in every single setting. So I don't think there's like one recipe that's going to work best for any staff, but I think it's just important to see, okay, of those gray areas, where do our strengths lie? And if I take over this thing, what does that leave you the ability to do more better and more efficiently? Or if you take over this, what does it leave me to be able to do more efficiently? Because there's so many, especially for mid majors, we don't have a sports scientist, PT, strength coach, and athletic trainer all on our staff like a lot of high major or pro teams have. And so we have the really cool opportunity to put our hands into a lot of different jars. But I think it's easy to overextend yourself. I think it's easy to kind of lose sight of what's most important. And I think it's easy for the athlete to get lost there as well. So I kind of going back to those very first points that we talked about, like, don't let it be about this is my responsibility, but maybe let's say, what does the athlete need and how can we both, based on those profiles that we've created together. Now, how can we both approach this from our respective angles? And then I think in any setting, if that's your approach, then the how you cover those gray areas is going to present itself much more efficiently versus just saying, "Hey, this is what I want to do because this is what I want to do."
And there you go again, the ideal relationship to then work
Hmm.
together. But ultimately, again, it always comes down to benefiting the athlete the most, right?
Correct.
And so this is the type of the relationship that helps the athlete be successful to that level. And it's that same point that you brought up earlier of success is shared. It's not, just one success from via one professional, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, the athletes are the ones who are putting out the success. They're the ones producing the success. So ultimately, we should just be happy for them
Correct.
because they're the
Yeah.
ones who put the time in as well. Well, something I am curious about too that we brought up kind of in the beginning, and I mean, we joked about it of you being in the top 5% of athletic trainers and strength coaches, but I mean, it's a serious issue. I mean, so many people leave the field to go private sector. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't every once in a while think, hey, I wonder if Samson needs a sales guy. I mean, just if that thought kind of pops into your head, I think everybody listening has those kind of quick thoughts, or kind of seeing this movement of people going towards the private sector or going into entirely different jobs. I know for athletic training, a lot of it's medical sales that a lot of people kind of end up transitioning into. What do you kind of attribute your ability to stay with it for so long?
I think there's something wrong with me in the head. No.
Maybe, maybe.
No, I'm married with three kids, and I don't know if anyone does this for for you know for like the glory. Very few of us, and if you are, it's gonna get tough pretty quickly. And I think it's important to set boundaries. That's how it's been for me. Um, 'Cause I remember I was offered at right out of school, I was offered an MLS internship that paid $500 a month, and I was like, I had two kids coming out of grad school. My second had just been born, and then I turned that down to go work Division II basketball because I was like, hey, these are my parameters of what I'm willing to do. And now for someone else that might be totally different, and that's totally cool. And then coming out of Ohio State, I had a G League offer that was like a two-bedroom apartment for 15 grand for the season. And my wife was pregnant with our third kid, and so I turned that down for to work at McNeese State in Division 1 at a small little school. And so I think for me it was, what do I want to do? What do I love? I love working with athletes. I love my job as an athletic trainer. Um, but I had to set parameters too. Like I wasn't also willing to sacrifice my family um, to this point. Don't get me wrong. Like working as an athletic trainer in college sports or as a strength, you still have to make a lot of sacrifices. Your family has to make a lot of sacrifices, and I think it can be tough. And so I don't blame anyone going to the private sector or going to sales or going working for Amazon, whatever you're doing, um, because again, it's just that it takes a lot to work in this environment. But I love the relationship that I get to have with my athletes, the players that I work with the coaching staff. I love being a part of a team, and I think that would be really hard to trade for any reason. So, um, and I'm just grateful to just be at Davidson. Right, it's a great, like you said at the beginning of the podcast. It's a great place to be. They're great people, and I feel very lucky to be here. Um, and I think it's easy to kind of get consumed in how much time doing this job requires, how much extra you have to expend of yourself. Um, to 20-year-olds who aren't don't always show their gratitude. You know what I mean? Like uh, there's some entitlement there for college athletes sometimes. And don't get me wrong, there's also wonderful athletes who show their gratitude that look out for me all the time, guys on the team, and coaches as well. But it can be tough. It can be really tough. And so I'm glad to see that staffs are growing at the mid-major level, and I hope that continues to trickle down to the low major level to high school level. That communities and schools and universities and colleges all see like, hey, the more we invest in the support of these athletes, the healthier they're going to be, the happier they're going to be, the happier the staff members that work with them are going to be. So it's tough, man. You're exactly right. It's we are the longer you stick in this game, the more you see it little down. And I think it's at the expense of the athlete too when that happens, unfortunately.
I agree with that last point 100%. I mean, because again, if I'm not coming into my job happy every day, like, as a strength coach, right, you're supposed to be the energy driver. You're supposed to be the excited one. And I've spoken about it with our director here. He just made a kind of a quick comment because I was like, how was the lift today? He was like, it was okay. He's like, he's like, I'm the one who determines that. So and we kind of just talked about it. He's right. Like every bad lift I've had, I've been like, was I in a bad mood before it started, or did something happen that put me in a bad mood during it, and then that made it a bad lift? Yeah, so 100%, like you said about the expense of the athletes, but I love the portion about setting boundaries too, and saying some things are just not going to be acceptable. Like, I post on TikTok and Instagram and all this stuff, and I made a video about, how people can kind of complain about the schedule, like you mentioned, getting really caught up in the amount of hours and just doing the math in their head of like I've worked this many hours this week and just getting caught up in that. And yeah, I mean, I've worked, over the past couple months, and I'm sure the same for you, crazy hours. We're at 70, 80 hours per week. I mean, and not even including travel, all that stuff. But what does May look like? Like, I don't do a single thing in May. I mean, I'm going to jujitsu all the time. I'm having like picnic lunches, and that's my time where I get a lot of the work done and prep for the rest of the year. So that when I am working 70 hours, a lot of it isn't just me like scrambling to get everything together. And somebody commented and said, well, it's not so easy to do. Like, I get it, but it's not so easy to do when you have six teams that are constantly in season year round. I said 100%. But that's where you have to set the boundary. You have to say, I'm not taking that job. I'm not going to do that.
Hmm.
Again, like you said, it may be fit for some people in certain areas, or it's not always an option to say no. I understand that. But I think when those are the jobs that are coming up that are forcing you to work 80 hours per week year round, and are really taking a toll on your mental, your physical health, like those are the boundaries you need to set. Like you shouldn't be worried about having a third child and then only making 500 per month. Like it just can't, like that just can't be the scenario. So I love the boundary setting aspect of it too, because I think that's just so valuable. And I think even more on the athletic training side, I've spoken with another athletic trainer here. We talked about, on the strength coach side, like because of social media, because of the popularity of strength and conditioning as a whole, strength coaches' salaries still don't match the sport coaches' salaries, but they're certainly higher, and they've grown more and more. I mean, we have strength coaches making over $1 million per year, and that's not the same for athletic trainers. So I think on the athletic training side, it's even more important to set those boundaries. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just the trend I've seen.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think athletic trainers, it's hard to show your value. It's hard to show like this is what I contribute, especially if you feel like you're an athletic trainer that just waits for injured people to walk through the door. And I think that's why I've tried to take a different approach than maybe from what I've seen from some of my peers when it comes to, hey, I'm going to be proactive in being part of the solution and showing that I'm valuable to this coaching staff. Like I'm valuable to these athletes. Um, and if I can be part of that, then maybe I can kind of bridge that gap where for athletic trainers from a compensation standpoint. Because if I think it's easy to sometimes look at athletic trainers with like a glorified medical secretary that sets people up to E-STEM, right? Like if all you're doing as an athletic trainer is bringing athletes in, putting them on stem and heat or stem and ice, and then shifting them over to see the team doctor, and then shifting them back over to do, you know, 3 sets of 10 quad sets, like you're and athletic trainers are better than that. They're trained better than that. I know you could say the same type of thing for in strength conditioning. Like there's people that kind of just like to go through the motions and and have kind of gotten into a pattern of kind of just showing up and doing it. And I'm not saying that those are bad things to do from a standpoint of taking care of athletes, helping them see doctors. Yes, that's essential to your job as an athletic trainer. Um, but I think being able to show your value to the coaching staff, to um, to supervisors, to athletic directors, there will be a point where a coaching staff will say, "I don't want to lose you. I don't want you to go take this other job." They will come back and say, "You are worth this much to us." And if they don't do that, I'm not saying that that athletic trainer isn't worth more than they're being paid, but I think you have to show that you're that valuable to the team. You have to show that something that I did when I got here said, what how many injuries per game did how many games did we miss because of injury each season before I got here? Okay, what am I going to do to decrease that number? And then I record that number. And I think we hardly see that even recorded for athletic trainers. One, because they might be so overwhelmed. But I was able to take those numbers to my supervisor, to our head coach, and say, hey, look, here's what I've been able to do based on my programming, based on the program that I've done with Coach B, how we've worked as a team for this. Um, is this, these are results that we're having. So if if you feel like that's valuable to us, then great. If not, then maybe I can explore someone else who would value these contributions more. And so I think it's you have to be willing to kind of adventure out and find where you are valued if you don't feel like you're valued where you're currently at.
I mean, that's such an amazing point that you bring up. I was thinking about it this morning, actually, during my lift. I was just kind of, just, I guess, almost going off on a tangent in my own head and just thinking about it, right? And I thought about previous jobs I've had, right? And I've had jobs where I've had the conversation about what is it going to take to keep you here, to make sure you
Mm-hmm.
don't leave. My current job, my value is that my fiance is the dietitian. She does such an amazing job that if I leave, they can't stand to lose her.
Exactly.
Yep.
First thing, find someone who helps keep you around.
Yep, there you go. Exactly it. So I'm safe on that front. But I've also had jobs before where I haven't had that conversation. It wasn't that I was doing a bad job, but I
Mm-hmm.
think like exactly what you're saying. Like I was doing the job I was being paid for. I wasn't producing results necessarily or demonstrating my value to that exact level because I remember at one job I had right up until I left, I was like, well, you know what? I really do feel like I'm bringing a little bit more value to the table than might be seen. And I kind of reflected on it. I was like, well, how much have I actually demonstrated that? Like, how much have I shown? Like, yeah, I showed my testing results and we went up 3% on the team's average vertical jump within this specific time stretch. But like, the coach doesn't really care about that, right? What they care about is knowing, okay, what are specific things that we've seen within game that can kind of help us, or compared to other programs, what does that metric actually look like? Because I know that was a really, really good metric, but she doesn't. She's not sitting here analyzing, looking at every single team's vertical jump within an 8 week time period. Didn't really care, So how can I demonstrate that value to make sure that I am being compensated in a way, or being valued just as a whole in a way that would reflect how I see myself in that situation too.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Because I think the more that you write those things down, when you first realize that, you're like, oh man, I wish I would have gone back and written what I had been doing like when I first got here, because then that becomes even easier to share that message with a coach. And I think with the transfer portal or NIL, that goes up even more, because if an
Yeah.
athlete feels like they're growing and progressing in an organization or in as part of a certain school team or whatever, then they're going to be much more likely to stay. You know what I mean? Now, I think in the end it comes down to playing time and exposure and stuff
Yeah.
like that in NIL. Like, don't get me
Yep.
wrong. When an athlete goes to the coach and has that conversation, my name is not anywhere near the top of the list. Hopefully for the right reasons, right? um, um, but at the same time, like you said, whether it's recruiting or NILs or transfer portal, like, man, these are great um, tertiary points that hopefully a coach can use, um, and hopefully that again that gives us all value. And I think sometimes even we don't even realize how much value we have, because we haven't even asked that question to our we haven't had that conversation with a supervisor and said, you know, what do you value as my supervisor?
Yeah.
And if they don't value the same things that you value, then you're going to have a hard time getting compensated for it anyways.
100%. That's my number one question during interviews is what is in 6 months, whoever gets hired for this position is absolutely killing it. Like they're doing exactly what you want to see them do. What does that look like? Because
Hmm.
then they'll give you the answers to the test immediately. Because if you get the job, it's not just, hey, I got the job and now I'm good. It's like you have to, again, like you mentioned initially, it's hard to make sweeping changes when you first get there. You just wanted to put in a 15-minute mobility session and you're getting there the day of the exhibition game. So they're like, who is this guy? Right? And you have to
Exactly.
demonstrate your value in that situation. But for previous jobs before, it's been like, well, I want to see specific guys gain weight, and I want to see their vertical jump go up. So what are we going to be doing? We're doing a ton of death drop box jumps, and I'm making sure they're eating every single meal, right? Because again, that can help show exactly to the coach that you are providing value for what they see as well too. But then you're also on the side getting into the things that you want to see that provide success to a program as well.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Justin, man, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been fantastic. Every time we've spoken, it's always been an energy giving conversation. So I really appreciate it. For anybody who's listening, what would be a good way to reach you if they have any questions on anything?
Um, I'm happy to chat. Probably easiest way to reach me is through my email address, juking, King, at davidson.edu, or I'm on Instagram at justin.king.atc. I don't post a ton, um, but my goal is always in the off season, more is going to go up, but we'll see. We'll see if I
Yeah.
follow through on that.
Well, and here's the thing too. I'm going to try to convince you, and I'm going to keep talking to you about this. I think you should write a book about this program. I really do, because it's one of the very few programs that to me has truly stuck out. Like I go to a lot of conferences. I read a lot of things. I look at a lot of different philosophies, and I think they all kind of boil down to very similar things and things that's like, yeah, I kind of already do this. Like what's something different that I can do, and that's why I wanted to reach out to you after your clinic because I knew that it was something that okay, this is something different that is really successful. So I hope the listeners stay tuned, and I hope you follow through and deliver a book because the last thing I want to bring up is the numbers that just astounded me. Like you spoke about those injury numbers. If you're okay with talking about those, can
Yeah.
you just give those to the listeners?
So in our program, we've averaged 2.5 games missed per season due to injury for the last 4, if we're going on 5 years. Um, 2 of the last 3 years, we've had seasons with 0 games missed due to injury. Since we started the program, we haven't had a single freshman throughout their entire career. So now we're going on our second set of freshmen. Um, so yeah, last year's freshmen graduated. Um, we haven't had a single freshman spend their entire career without missing a game due to lower extremity injury. So the people that did miss games due to lower extremity injuries were all transfers coming in the past 4 years, and those averaged about 2.5 games per year during that time.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, seriously, like that is providing value. That's showing your value in Coach Seiss' value and the value of your relationship working together. So, again, I urge you to write the book. I think it would be a bestseller, and I'd promote it. So,
I appreciate it. We'll see. We'll see whenever we have time for that. We'll try to make it happen.
you just got to let me write the forward. That's it.
You got it, Connor. Well, thanks for
All right.
having me, man. I appreciate it, and it's been great getting to know you over the past year or so. And I think you've done a great job in your position and kind of spreading the good word of all this stuff. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and it's been fantastic. And selfishly, it's super fun for me, right? Because I just get to learn about everything from everybody. So super exciting. But well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.